Welcome to the Eskrima podcast. My name is Jason Inai, and I'm an Inai Eskrimador. It's been a few days since I've done an episode, at least recorded one, and we've been covering lots of different kinds of material. Saturday class, we did some double stick, of course, some serrata, and some empty hand. Last night was Tuesday night's class, and we covered. Initially, we covered some serrata, and I actually started the training backwards. Normally, we have a flow. As I teach the United System of Eskrima to my students and instructors to teach to others, I teach that this system, which if you've been training with me, is or even my father for that matter, is a system of martial arts, meaning that by the definition of that from my father is, a system of martial arts is where there are multiple styles that are taught in completion that complement each other and contrast each other in a way that allows for greater study and greater depth of experience, skill, and knowledge of the individual practitioner and by extension instructors of the United System of Eskrima. Also, I teach that it's the art itself, and then there's our code of ethics and our standards, for behavior and things like that. And then there's our tradition, right? Tradition is going to be all the different kinds of exercises, drills, and the way that we employ them in the different styles, in the different parts of the art, if you will. That the art is comprised of its physical component, but then it's also the cipher, right? And then the code is just as much as it is about ethics, it's also about our martial spirit. So those three things together, right? So I reversed the tradition, if you will, last night in terms of like the normal flow. We usually do warm-ups and fundamentals and basics and things like that. And you build to reflex training, and you build to, more advanced training, if you will. And I did somewhat at least backwards. I did the drills that we might do at the end of class, we did at the beginning of class. And you could see some of the students, even one of the advanced guys is like trying to figure out what we're going to do and trying to get a peek, and I'm like, nope, get in line, right? Get ready to perform, do your thing. And then the point of the lesson was, one, I wanted to shake up people's expectations a little bit. It's the name of my system is the United System of Eskrima, but the subtext or the subtitle under that in the system logo is Filipino Weapons Combat. So, and then Cicero Kevin Shanemek out in Wisconsin, he had put out this meme, and it said something to the effect of like, your warm-ups should be like your training, and your training should be like your techniques and your fighting, and your reflex training and your sparring, or rather your technique should be like your reflex training and your sparring, and your sparring should be like your fighting, which is basically to say your warm-up should be like your fighting. Right? Which I definitely agree with. This sentiment is a really good way of looking at things in terms of how we might shape the training, right? And it's a challenge for an instructor to really look at the art that they're doing and whatever tradition that they're responsible for, and how they might execute that idea. Right? In class last night, we start with the reflex drill, and everyone's trying to figure it out. And I was shaking up the tradition, shaking up the expectations a little bit as a part of it, because it's, ultimately we're trying to teach combat, and that means I need to simulate elements of combat, in its pieces, right? One of them is uncertainty. One of them is not being ready. One of them is being surprised. One of them is, one of the elements of combat for the average individual in the West, and just in most civilized areas, for the average citizen / civilian, is that a fight is going to be a surprise. It's going to be unrehearsed, unscheduled. And the person that you're going to fight, if they're the one instigating the fight, is not going to be your weight class, not necessarily going to be your skill level. And in most cases today, that skill level is on the favor of that, where the advantage is on the assailant, the aggressor. Because usually people who are willing to commit violence of any kind, especially in terms of like fighting, have done it before. Most behaviors that people exhibit are behaviors that they've exhibited before, right? And in terms of aggression and fighting and basically, incivility, right? That is going to be on the advantage to be on the aggressor, because for whatever reason they come from a place, a time, a community, or a mindset that makes that okay. And for the rest of the civilized society, it isn't. And so as a martial artist, or someone practicing martial arts, you're preparing for that, right? Because violence is a thing. I had the fortune during the Caribbean Martial Arts Expo to be with to be able to hang out with these instructors, and a lot of them are from Canada. And the media might portray Canada as this free-loving society or peaceful society, but the picture I was getting was very different, as in terms of what their gun violence is like, what their gang violence and drug crime is like, and things like that in certain areas. And so people may walk around with rosy glasses on and think that the world is really nice, and for the most part it is, but like my law enforcement experience and my security experience just shows me otherwise. And I live in an affluent area, right? And I worked in that area for both jobs. So our training has to be such that the warm-ups approximate our training, which approximates our sparring, which approximates our fighting. So our warm-ups should be like our fighting, if we make that logical leap. And so we used the reflex training at the beginning, and it wasn't too much, if you will. We didn't overdo it, if you will. I didn't push it to its full limit, but that uncertainty was a very useful thing to bring out in class and have people remember it. We moved on after that to refining things for some empty hand skills and things like that, and then moved it back out to self-defense, right? And then ended with a refinement drill. And this morning when I'm thinking, okay, well, I need to do another episode, because the task here, the challenge that I'm trying to do with these podcasts right now for myself is not to develop content for my students internationally, but to just document the things that we do. And I'm like, well, what do I document? I've talked about these things all the time. And while the beginning of this episode is talking about mixing those things up, the thing I haven't talked about is how much fun it was, right? We forget sometimes in our martial arts that a lot of people do it not only for the self-defense, but because they enjoy it, that there are things that are fun to do, right? And my uncle, he says, if I'm teaching a class and I don't teach a new technique, Johnny and Sam down there are not going to be satisfied, right? And if I don't make sure that you guys break a sweat, then Lisa and Sarah and Jennifer aren't going to come to class, because they're there to get a workout, right? And so he's trying to balance this idea of some students are there to learn something new, some students are there to get a workout, and then there are also some students that are just trying to get better at one or two things, right? There's those people too, right? And all the time they're doing it because they're engaged. A person who's looking for a workout is enjoying the class as a workout because it's fun for them, right? And they're meeting some personal goal or need, right? The person who is looking to learn a new technique or new movement or new thing is enjoying class when they get to do that because they're engaged. Maybe fun for them is both the puzzle or the intellectual challenge of accumulating a new motor skill, if you will, right? The person that's trying to get just better at the things that they know already is looking at, increasing their own sense of self, possibly, or they're looking to, meet this higher standard of excellence within themselves. And I hope that my students are all of those things and more, when we teach. And I know that for myself, I do like getting a workout, right? And I tell my students, the ones that I'm like, if you know this drill, go faster. If you're not learning, then go harder and faster, with an agreement with your classmate, your training partner, right? You don't want to overdo it with your partner and end up with, a bad experience, an injury or something like that, right? But, I hope that all of my students have all those elements that they're looking for themselves, that they're trying to get a workout, that they're trying to learn something new, and they're trying to get better at the things that they already know, right? Because that's fun, right? It's enjoyable to see yourself get exercise, become engaged, interact with others, and improve yourself. And lesson after lesson, if you see that for yourself, week after week, month after month, year after year, as my student or my peer with my students that are now instructors, achieving new levels of ability, understanding, physical output is a way of gaining confidence and gaining self-esteem and self-respect for oneself and one's ability to achieve, right? So I forget sometimes in my effort to talk about a practical technique, or to talk about or present a drill that brings out a practical element that would be useful to understand and employ in a real situation, whether it be self-defense or street fight or home invasion or any of those things. Or maybe I'm just preparing students for the next competition, whether it be an exhibition of ability or it actually truly be a fighting event, right? Like, we've got to remember that we learn and we are engaged and we continue to do the things that we enjoy. And I really enjoyed class last night. And even though that I, in particular, have an injury right now, and so I can't go at the output that I would like to, I was still very much engaged in everyone else's experience and being a part of that as my role is in class as the head instructor or the chief instructor. And then I got to engage with a new student who's auditing the class right now and answering his questions about things, and that was very cool too, right? But ultimately, I enjoyed seeing our youth students and our adult students working together, and we did a self-defense drill or exercise. And I'm the youngest one. She's like, I don't know, I think she's like 13 or something like that. I always say that she's 12 because it's fun to tease the kids a little bit, and it's important to give everyone a little bit of chastisement, and that creates camaraderie. But with children, shaking them up a little bit psychologically to keep them resilient is useful. Just a little gentle chiding is going to help set the stage for when we start, hardening them psychologically, so that words are not the thing that they're worried about in terms of their self-esteem and their feeling like they're hurt or not, right? But I'm put her on the spot, and I'm demonstrating the technique, and I'm telling her, hey, you got to tell me to stop when I'm no longer doing self-defense and I've become the aggressor. And then we had a little conversation about that as well in class, because it's important for us to understand as martial artists that, you know, this ideal of self-defense is maybe not realistic, right? That it's more complicated than simply I learned this whatever technique it is, and you know, the person grabs me by the throat and I release the grab and I break the arm and I sweep the leg and I chop at the back of the neck and I kick them in the head on the when they're on the ground, right? At what point did we move away from self-defense and towards being the aggressor, right? It's an important understanding. Now, it's not to say that you shouldn't use the technique, right? Because the context is very important. Like doing that to one person, probably immediately after releasing the neck grab or the choke, it's no longer, you know, self-defense. Now you're just attacking someone, right? Unless, of course, you know, you can articulate that that person is going to continue to attack, which is likely. But maybe, you know, breaking the arm and then sweeping down and then chopping the back of the neck, we were definitely starting to cross that line. And kicking someone when they're down is definitely over the line, right? Unless there's another context. There's other people involved. There's other exigent circumstances that, if articulated well, would justify that kind of thing. And so we just kind of really just kind of breach that subject as a part of the end of it, right? And the refinement section of the class was just one of our basic drills that, you know, my Uncle Danny teaches, my dad has been teaching, I've been doing for, I don't know, 40 something years, right? And it's for counter wiping and things like that. Meanwhile, the gurus are on the side, and they had, like, it's funny how it happens, and Guru Lauren, he always says, it's like, you know, it's crazy, every time Lahong Guru Chris Castle and I are working out and I come to class, you're automatically teaching very similar or the exact same thing that we've been working on, and we don't discuss the lesson plans anymore. You know, part of teaching others to become instructors is to teach them how to teach. And so I've taught all my students, you know, how to develop lesson plans, how to assess a student and their need based upon their rank, but also based upon their, you know, what skill they exhibit and, you know, what abilities they seem to have and what shortcomings they seem to have, and how we might design a lesson plan that addresses several or all of the students in certain ways and certain students individually in certain ways, right? So that you're constantly moving everyone forward at least a little bit incrementally. But he goes, yeah, it's amazing because you do that. And last night I'm teaching the thing, getting ready to start stuff, and I start at one place in the training, and I have the girls give them some direction, and then they go off and do their own thing most of the time so that they can develop themselves. And they're doing it. I'm like, why are you guys doing the thing that I'm planning on doing at the end of class? It's kind of funny. So, and then I, of course, added quite a bit of criteria to that to guide their working, their work towards something that was more meaningful than just kind of experimentation, right? And we ended up doing all that stuff, and everyone's having fun laughing and stuff. And I often joke about, like, this is martial arts, you shouldn't be laughing or smiling, it's not supposed to be fun. And that's my little joke, right, about that. And it usually gets a chuckle from some of the people, right, because they all know now that I'm joking about that. But having them train and do those things and go towards that level, and then talking at the end of class of why we do the drills and the uniforms and how those things work together to help help us all gain a sense of accomplishment and identity and ability was part of the end of the class, right? And it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun, you know, for the students that I have that are relatively new, right? And I have some intermediate students and some very senior students all working together, you know. And the new guy that's auditing, he's viewing the class prior to starting. He had some things he needed to get started up, but he came in, he got his equipment and everything else like that. He's like, you know, like asking questions about, like, you know, what's the level in the room. And he had commented about the one of the younger youths and saying, it's really good to see this person in the room, because I feel more comfortable because I'm more at that person's level, right? And so I don't feel like I'm walking in. And I find that this is, I guess, part of the tradition of my family system, in that we've never had as a regular thing, white belts to or white sashes to orange sash class, and then a green sash to a black sash class, right? Or gold sash to black sash class. We've never done any of that things. First level students and then second level students, and then our advanced students later. And we will have a special advanced student class in addition to our regular group class, but generally group class is a mixed level class. And I explained to him, the thing is that the people that you're going to encounter in life are not going to necessarily be your weight class. They're not going to be your ability. And the reality is that new students bring new energy and new movement and new perspective. And the advanced students, the senior students, they need that. And the senior students can help guide the junior students. There's a lot of value if, you're training 15, 10, 5 or 6 years and you feel like you're more advanced than the 1 year students and the 2 month students. And so, you might feel like, oh, I don't want to do that. I want to work with my skill level. The reality is that the unorthodoxy in the motor skill, the movement, the way that a new person will come in unchoreographed to strike a punch. You say punch and they punch in sometimes surprising ways, odd ways, ineffectual ways, weirdly effective ways, etc., is a new set of stimuli that makes it so that you have to adapt your movement, right? Because like I tell students, I'm like, we're going to train, and eventually you'll be punching each other. You'll be trying to hit each other with sticks, and there will be a level of risk that you have to come up to and accept to get to certain levels. And your appetite for risk will determine how good you'll get in certain circumstances or under certain criteria, right? And that risk is important for you because this is not a book club. It's not a sewing circle. So, and I tell students that in a fighting school, even the teacher is going to get struck. That's the nature of a fighting school, because you're learning to fight, you're fighting, you're play fighting, you're practicing, and you're taking risks. If you're not taking risks, you're not learning, you're not getting better. But because of that unorthodoxy, we create new risk for us at low intensity. Very useful for us, right? It's a cheap lesson to get struck by someone who strikes us in an unorthodox manner, right? That we then have to adapt to. That's a cheap lesson. That's a lesson that doesn't include stitches or, a cold pack on the face, or a visit to the hospital, or a paramedic ride, or anything. It's just, oops, let's try that again, right? And I guess that the one thing that I would fail in that, preparing people for that, is to prepare new people. I say, hey, this is going to be the training, and you might hit someone that you might view as like, oh, that person's more senior and you shouldn't be able to touch them. There's a lot of things that are going on with that, with regards to, like, if you're swinging a fist or a stick or a knife, or you're doing a kick and you make contact when you think that you shouldn't have. Most of the time, the senior person is trying to protect the junior person from themselves. In other words, they're not trying to go too hard, too fast, or not trying to do things, in the preparation for your attack. There might have been a great tell in your retraction or your chambering that would have allowed for a leisurely preemptive attack, but we didn't take it, right? Because that's not part of the learning experience, right? So I could set up expectations on that side, but the students that are receiving have, been fully made aware, either by direct experience or by instruction, that, hey, new people can hit you because they're going to hit weird, and that's super useful. So I explained to this new student that's auditing, and he liked that perspective, right? And I think it was great for him to on a day where, while we're doing all those things, I'm noticing more of the engagement and the enjoyment in class, right? I spent more than 10 years, probably closer to 17 or 18 years, consuming as much material as I can, or could at the time, on how people process information, what their psychology is, how they develop sense of belief, how beliefs change in others, right? And generally, I wanted to understand the beliefs, psychology, process of cogitation, process of developing motor skill, developing skillful movement in general, from a physiological and psychological standpoint, and understanding specifically here what I'm talking about as a learning event, right? Education, by and large, in Western society, at least here in the United States, is by rote, right? It's memorization by rote. It's a repetition until you get it kind of thing, to the point where the adage, repetition is the mother of skill, it is a highly lauded, vaunted concept or idea that is, from the point of view of teaching people, if we truly understand what a learning event is, if we truly understand what behavioral shaping is and whatnot, is a very crude and low-level understanding of behavioral shaping, or the ability to teach someone, right? It's the difference between, I want you to memorize a bunch of stuff so you can pass a test, to, I actually want to teach you how to critically think, right? Critical thinking is a much more difficult process, and society is not necessarily served by having a whole bunch of critical thinkers, which is why our education system doesn't really teach that, right? There's a whole debate there. But in the scope of teaching Eskrima, or martial arts, right, understanding how people process information and how we can, nurture behaviors that are useful for duress. Hopology is the study of human behavior under duress. Hopology is a study of warriorship or fighting, right? From an academic standpoint, and how warrior traditions of ancient time and modern time develop people with the ability to perform under the most extreme of circumstances in the human experience, right? And that comes down to, how do we learn, right? Which is what I'm getting at, right? This learning event. And engagement's a really important part of it, and fun is a really great way to develop a learning experience, a learning state. When it came to me this morning, I'm like, well, what am I going to talk about? Hey, we had fun. It was enjoyable. People were good at things, and they took value away from class, and there were some things that we sucked at, and we realized that we really needed to get better at, right? I always point this out in the last handful of years about like certain techniques, like joint locking, never really worked, blah blah blah. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, bro, right? Disarms will never work. I'm like, I've had students that have actually in real life disarmed people, right? So like, right? But that's different, and people want to move that needle around and create an argument that supports their belief, right? But the reality is that just about anything that we teach in traditional martial arts is achievable in a real fight, provided that the context is correct and that the training was good and that you don't actually suck, right? And you're going to suck if you hate class and you're not enjoying it. You're not going to get good at it and you'll quit, right? If you're bored, you're not stimulated, for either because it's the wrong class for you, the wrong instructor, the wrong art for you, right? Or the environment in and of itself doesn't foster learning experiences, right? You're gonna suck, right? We always have to be careful of this adage of like, I'll just dispose of what's not useful in the training, right? Right? That's also saying that whatever wisdom brought an element of material into the curriculum or the training, right? Which you may not be privy to because you're not all that wise, right? As a practitioner or a teacher, right? Is something that you're not mature enough to understand. And, you know, the easiest way, which I tell my students quite directly, is because you suck at that. If you were better, you know, and I've heard my Uncle Danny say that to someone once. He goes, you know, they're like, oh, you know, this thing and that thing, and, you know, like, you can see you do it, but when we do our sparring and stuff like that, we can't do that. And, you know, this person's notorious for not wanting to drill and, you know, like, do this thing, which brings me to another thought, right? But, you know, why can't we do that? And he goes, like, you don't do the drills. You don't practice this. You don't practice it right? So, I'm reading Black Belt Magazine, and I'll end you guys with this, or end this episode with this thing. So, you know, I was at the seminar years and years and years ago. We're talking like 30 years ago or more. Yeah, about 30 years ago. It was in the mid-90s, early mid-90s. And this guy who became relatively popular, and he has a following, and he's, you know, he's done the Filipino martial arts, but he takes the military bend, the tall white guy. It's like, drills, drills, drills. Everybody wants to drill. Blah, blah, blah. And he's disparaging this methodology of teaching that, you know, is, you know, they do drills in the military. Like, and I'm not talking about like the old military. I'm talking about today military, right? Like, and they use it, and those people come home. Most of them, hopefully. I hope they all come home. But my point being is that, you know, organizations that have millions of dollars spent on teaching methodologies and instructional, you know, structures, pedagogy, you know, use drilling. It's drills, drills, drills. When does it ever end? And then he starts to teach a seminar with a drill. Oh, and you know, the thing is that people eat it up. And I have colleagues that are like, this guy is great. And I'm like, yeah, maybe. He's probably great for you. But like, you start with, like, there's a system of martial arts that goes, you know, we're going to teach you this one art, and then we're going to teach you the art that we really teach you to beat that art. I'm like, that's ridiculous. That is sorry for anybody who might be offended. That is the greatest martial masturbation thing that I could ever see, right? I want to teach you Taekwondo so I can teach you Jiu-Jitsu to beat Taekwondo. God, that's stupid. You're stupid if you've swallowed that and you've not critically looked at that as just a fallacy of some kind of just, oh my God. Anyways, I'm reading Black Belt Magazine's email yesterday, and they're like, we've got this new, you know, cutting edge, you know, everyday carry knife program that's made by these guys, and I like the guys. I really do like the guys, right? But the marketing is like, you know, there's lots of programs that they're outdated because they do these old flow drills. And you're not just going to get this fluffy program with all these flow drills and blah, blah, blah. And then the first bullet where they start to go over the feature benefits and values is 39 drills developed. I'm like, really? Really? You're gonna disparage one methodology to, it's like, I get it that you need to differentiate your product, you need to differentiate your learning, right? But start with an insult and then go ahead and do it again. Like, if you don't see the irony there, right, and that you do that, and I'm sure it's working because, you know, the reality is marketing messages, as much as anything else, they don't have to be particularly good. This is part of my own personal study, right? They just need to be repeated, right? If people see that, you know, these people are out there and these are the people that are out there, they walk away thinking that those people are the authority. The truth is, for those of you who are out there, the people that aren't in the front all the time, the people that are in the back, some of the unknowns, are actually the awesome people that you need to go hunt out and seek, right? The people that taught the people that taught the people. The people that are out there that are popular that find these other people to be the people that are really cool, but they're just not that popular, right? Right? So that's fine. You can be popular and you can be great at it, and I applaud you and I wish you all the success, but don't start with, don't do drills because they suck. But you know what I'm going to teach you now? 39 pre-designed drills that'll really develop. All right. So either you don't really understand what you're saying, or you're saying that your prospective client is an idiot that doesn't have any critical thinking. And if that's the candidate or the client or the student that you want, have them, please, because stupid people should not learn how to use knives because they have very poor critical thinking capacity, and they'll misuse that material, or they'll just misrepresent and mislearn it. Anyways, I'll see you guys on the training floor, but I'll tell you what, don't do those drills, because they're just a waste of time, and I'll teach you a new drill.